And welcoming to the show, the president of Te Tai Tokerau's Principals Association is Pat Newman. Pat, with a fantastic name and a fantastic opinion. Welcome to the show, whatever that means. Hi. Hey, thank you for
One
joining
Pat
us.
to another Pat. Let's pat our backs. Carry on.
Perfect. Hey, look, thank you for joining us. This is a subject that I've been wanting to cover off basically since I think last Friday, but there's been so much in the news at the moment. It's kind of taken a couple of days for us to get to it. What I wanted to do is actually, because it has been ongoing, this conversation around, it's kind of started with what National saying they were going to do with sort of youth offenders, and it's kind of flowed into National what they're going to do with all these difficult school students. And I guess as the president of the Principals Association, you'll be a good person to talk to about that. What I'd like to do is start by actually playing an item off last night's News Hub. It's only 90 seconds, but that will give us the introduction to talking about what we're going to talk about. So, okay. If people haven't seen this yet, I'm sure you've seen this. This is from last night's News Hub, so it's 28 hours old, but they're still talking about it tonight. And this is News Hub reporting what National is looking at doing within schools with policy. They haven't put out yet, but I guess ideas for policy for next year's election.
National Party leader Christopher Luxon has added to his growing list of people who should take responsibility for the truancy crisis, and this time it's parents in the firing line.
The Prime Minister has slammed the comments, saying Luxon has oversimplified a complex situation for political gain. Here's political editor Jenna Lynch.
Pointing the finger at parents.
You chose to have these kids. You have to wake up at 7 a.m. You get your kids to school at 8.
Christopher Luxon has no time for excuses.
We've now got subsidised, free lunches, free breakfasts, subsidised period products, subsidised school uniforms. There's no excuses. And what we have in New Zealand is a culture of excuses.
No, I do not agree.
Last week, Luxon put principals on notice.
There is a mixed standard of leadership across our schools and across our principals that actually means that they're not focusing as strongly on getting kids to school as they can.
After the latest figures show just 40% of children went to school regularly in Term 2 this year.
It's a social failure, it's a moral failure, and it's a future economic crisis.
A crisis he's now laying at the feet of parents.
I think that it is a very simple view of the world.
The PM laying Luxon's comments, past and present, at his feet.
We've heard people called bottom feeders, we've heard teachers blamed, now we hear parents blamed.
National's talking tough on crime in response to ram raids last week, announcing it would bring back boot camps.
The only debate should be what works. And we know, because history's told us, boot camps don't work.
We are going to show some tough love in order to get them right on the right path.
Both sides talking tough, and the targets are everywhere. Parents, teachers, principals, but most of all, each other. Jenna Lynch, News Hub.
Right, there you go, Pat. So there's the story that's basically being talked about at the moment. National bringing out policy to talk about what they're going to do. Would they be government? Do you want to respond to that first of all from a principal's position? Would love to get your thoughts before we maybe go into some specific questions.
Yeah, well, look, to be quite honest, mate, it just shows that Luxon has absolutely no knowledge of, I'll say, anything to do with kids and teenagers. And that he's changing his view each day, in my view, because he goes back to his puppet master, Seymour, to find out what to say. And it's Seymour that's jerking the strings around this, and Seymour knows that little about education. It's not funny. But, if a person wants to get up and pontificate, apparently knowing everything, you would hope that they would get things correctly. For instance, when he talks about the low percentage attending schools and saying how terrible it is, and it is not good, he forgets to tell people, or he probably doesn't know, that the figures are reflecting of children or students who don't attend 90% of the time or more.
So it's a 10%.
So what they're talking about
rate,
is you may have 88% attendance, so you go into the pile of poor attendance. All right?
Right.
If you are away at a tangi, you only need 4 days a term to be away, and it drops you below that 90%. So, he puts out these trite little comments, and he being blunt, he pisses me off because we're working our guts out to actually do something effective. We are doing something effective. And then you get this moron getting on television with his shiny very head. I've got to be careful what I say about his head, but with his shiny head trying to say that he knows everything. And what he's doing is he's leading into party politics where National is going to adopt the right-wing acts education policy and all the rest of it.
What I would be really keen to do is for you to stop holding back on your thoughts and really tell us what you're thinking. I think that would be
I thought I was.
So what you're saying, if kids are away for 5 days or more, they're considered in that 40%.
Yep.
So in other words,
In a term.
if you're sick for a week, and we're still in a pandemic, where if you get, I mean, obviously, if you're a household contact, you can still come to work, but if you get COVID, you must stay at home for 7 days. So that must have some kind of impact on school. It's not going to be all the absences, but it's going to have some kind of impact there as well.
Yeah, we're concentrating on actually being effective and moving those who are genuinely in that low truancy area. And we're not putting out trite things just to get votes, which is what Mr. Luxon seems to be doing.
Can I ask then, I mean, you're talking about focusing on the kids that are more absent, more than 5 days, 10, 20, 30 days, whatever it is. At what point as a principal do you start to get concerned about kids being absent? Like what Mr. Luxon is using that for being absent for 4 days being a huge warning sign. What do you actually use as an actual warning sign? How many days per term would a kid need to be away for you to then start to get worried?
Yeah. Well, every day, if a kid's not in, we contact the families either by phone or by text or whatever. So that's the first thing that we've been doing for a number of years, and it costs us a fortune, but it's well worth it. I personally look at 95% and below, believe it or not, and if someone's hitting 95% and below, then I start to ask, what's the reason? And most of the time, it's genuine. Okay. If you're hitting below the 70%, I'm really concerned.
Right. Okay. So you're not saying 80% is okay, but 70% is massive red flag warning signs, get onto it.
Probably kicking in before that, but that would be the one where I go into overdrive, if that's the word for it.
I'm interested as well in your experience as a principal, and you've been around for a while doing this, that how schools have worked under a national government. Because when I hear Mr. Luxon saying rallying against free lunches, free breakfasts, subsidised school uniforms and subsidised period products, I think, okay, so does that mean National is going to stop all of that and fund the schools in a different way? So if that's being cut part of the program now that's useful in schools, we haven't heard what National is going to do, but what's your experience of running schools under a national government?
Diabolical. It made me nearly give up the job under Hekia and them with their national standards and their total lack of any educational pedagogy behind their stuff. Their decisions were done around political expediency, what would hold votes, what parents and people would think were good, not knowing the actual truth. And it destroyed my belief in what was great about New Zealand education. And it worries me because we're hearing that Seymour wants to be the Minister of Education. That's his price for going along with National. We're worried because we've heard his stuff. We're worried that he's adopting the American model, which is page 1 to 4 on Monday, page 5 to 10 on Tuesday, etc., that only reading, writing, and mathematics are matter, which is a past experience. And I'm just worried, very, very worried for our kids and our communities, because I suspect that the stuff that you're talking about and which is so valuable will disappear or be watered down. It was funny, just before I came on here, I went back and you know how on Facebook you can look on past comments. And there was one from about 2012 talking about the massive inequity in Te Tai Tokerau, the food that wasn't up here, all that sort of stuff. Now, whether you like Labour or not, I'm not going to talk that. But they've put a massive investment into the kids of New Zealand that no other government ever has. And I will argue that all day and night, the investment for kids and equity for kids has been absolutely phenomenal. And I hope people remember that.
How do you feel being a principal, sort of the head of a community, having the leader of the opposition somewhat attacking the parents in a situation and basically telling them to pull their boot, pull the socks up and get on with it. And if you weren't responsible, if you didn't want to be responsible for these kids, you should never have had them. As someone who's like a leader in the community with lots of families and parents around them, I guess parents are kind of your core. It's certainly your supply chain. Parents are your supply chain, Pat. How do you feel about the leader of the opposition saying that?
Well, you've got to remember where he's getting the words from. He's getting it from their marketers to how to hit every nasty part of people's feelings, and Seymour, and it pisses me off. I can't use any other word, because he is trivializing my work, my colleagues' work, the work of every teacher and principal and community leader in New Zealand, and he thinks it's a big joke all to get a few votes. Of course, people are going to agree with him. Oh, yeah, parents are terrible. Wait till it's their turn.
Do you get the feeling, and this might be a little bit controversial to ask an educator this, but do you get the feeling that there is a racial undertone to this? Because I've seen various memes and stuff going around today about when a particular National Party MP by the name of Sam Uffindell, when he was a troubled and violent youth, he got shipped off to another private school. Yet all these kids that they're talking about, kind of just maybe coincidentally a lot of them seem to be sort of brown young people that they seem to be focusing on this. Do you believe that there is a either overt or subvert racial element to this?
I believe it's a very, very open racial perspective and also socioeconomic perspective. Take Seymour, who was shipped off to King's when he was a young lad. I think he must have undergone some sort of trouble, him being separated and sent to boarding school at such an age, and it's never gone away. But I honestly do believe it. But the silly thing is, they don't realise that one of the big groups for truancy are the rich who bugger off overseas for their holidays.
Yeah.
And they take their kids with them out of school time because it's cheaper.
Yeah, of course.
But I don't know whether it's racial so much as a total lack of understanding in this sort of Puritan viewpoint that hard work will overcome every problem, and if a person's got a problem, then they need to go out and work harder and get at it. And it's a load of bunkum.
Hey, I'd like to ask you one more question. I mostly wanted to get you on tonight to speak to the leader of the opposition talking about truancy and parents, but I want to show you another video. Very, very good looking young man from 5 years ago. And the thing that I wanted to bring up is the idea of boot camps. Now, in 2017, you said this about boot camps.
That's a hell of a lot of kids. And we've been screaming and screaming and screaming. And we have never had the help that we need up here.
Nā i tēnei wiki I whakaputaina I te kāwanatanga te rautaki kia whakatū I te kaupapa no hōpuni.
There's no evidence that it works. Well, we know it doesn't work. There's evidence it doesn't. That 20 million would be better being put into help these kids now. Because otherwise, these are the ones that are going to go to Ngāwhā prison. These are the ones that are going to end up dysfunctional as parents.
And what I wanted to ask you was, my understanding is this is the third time National has tried to float this boot camp idea. The first time they enacted it and had to pull it back. The second time was 2017, where you were saying it's not going to work, and they're doing it again now. What are your thoughts around what Christopher Luxon and the National Party are doing at the moment when they're bringing back this idea for at least a third time of boot camps?
Well, it shows they're very slow learners. That's one reason. Particularly when the guy who was in charge of it came out yesterday and said they didn't work. It was all right when they were in boot camp, but when they went back to the environment, they reverted back. And that would be what was expected. But look, you've got to remember this has got nothing to do with whether something will work, whether it's good for New Zealand. It's got nothing to do whether it will be good for the students or the kids or teenagers involved. For God's sake, we're talking about putting 10-year-old kids into a boot camp. Is this New Zealand? I mean, it sounds a real easy fix, and if you don't think about it, you turn around and say, yeah, great idea, let's do it, those little buggers. But start thinking about it. How many parents have got 10-year-olds? How would you feel if they were put into a boot camp? How would you feel? That's not New Zealand. And yes, we have a major problem here around it, and I understand that. But that is not the way to go. And I was talking to a very senior National Party MP just on the weekend about it. And I won't name the person, but they actually said they have been trying to get them to not go down with that idea, but turn it into a much more therapeutic, all-round helping idea. But look, are we going to sell our souls for a couple of votes and put kids basically into boot camps that we know have never worked overseas, never worked in New Zealand, and yet we're going to spend the money on it? It's criminal.
The president of Te Tai Tokerau Principals Association is Pat Newman. Pat, thank you so much for joining us today. I've very much enjoyed our conversation, and I hope we can stay in touch and maybe connect again when these sorts of issues come up.
Mate, look, I don't mind doing it because my view is that if what I'm saying gets to some of the principals and teachers around the country and some of the parents, then it's so they actually open their eyes up a little bit. It's well worth doing it.
Pat Newman, thank you for your time.
Thanks, mate. Take care.